Alex. Alex, you are on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet all of you.
Howdy.
So my question is regarding labels, or I guess identities, and how you guys choose to take those on. I've been listening to the show, and you guys are talking about how sort of your sexuality is an evolution, which I totally agree with. I guess my hang-up is, when does something get actually integrated into, this is what I'm calling myself, this is who I am, versus, oh, this is just something I'm trying on, flavor of the week kind of thing.
I think the moment that you say that it does.
Yeah.
You know, the moment that you decide to introduce yourself, stick your hand out and say, hi, I'm a kinkster. Hi, I'm gay. Hi, there's not a right time to do that. Sometimes will feel more right for you, but there's no magic litmus test unless I'm missing it.
And I'd say with that evolution, there's nothing wrong with you identifying one way today and tomorrow finding out that you want to identify a different way.
Absolutely.
I am kind of in that situation right now where I identify differently than I did 6 months ago, and I'm sure, almost positive, I'm going to identify differently in another 6 months as my wonderful journey from vanilla to whatever continues. It's just whatever label you want to use to identify yourself at that particular time, and no one's saying you even have to use a label.
Right. It definitely, I feel like labels help as sort of a shorthand to, I guess, what you're trying to get across. But I guess I just worry about, I feel sort of a sense of obligation as far as, when I choose to use a label like, this is me, this is who I am, this is how I'm representing myself to other people. And then should that label change, I almost feel like maybe I let somebody down, or does that make sense?
It does. I would say that's more maybe a fear of what other people think than how you feel.
Yeah.
About yourself, I mean.
Yeah, there's definitely a loud voice of people that would say that these labels don't matter and that we should feel comfortable taking them off and putting them on, and maybe we should just do away with them altogether. And I think that there's some valid points in that. I do think that feeling comfortable sort of throwing words around a little bit and not overly stressing this particular box that you're in, or checking off this or that or the other. At the same time, I know that I've really suffered. I've really bled for some of these adjectives that I ascribe to myself. And so they are incredibly important, but kind of only because I say that they are. It's the meaning that I give them that has value. It's not anybody else's understanding of what those words mean. It's not anybody else's judgment. It's the fact that they matter to me, and I've fought for them, that make them so important to me personally. And you get to decide how meaningful those things are and what it really means to take on that type of label or adjective.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I guess probably where I'm struggling the most is identity, really. I have a clear idea of what I want out of a relationship, but I have a really hard time sort of verbalizing that. Even using those labels, I feel like it doesn't really get across, what I'm really looking for. I've been on FetLife, and that was a short-lived adventure because there's 50,000 labels on there, and I'm like, I don't know, I just want to meet people and try stuff out, and can we just hang out?
I think you'll find the kink community is pretty welcoming of that. We do use the labels as shorthand, very much so, but it's perfectly acceptable within the community, if somebody says, where do you fall on, for example, the domination submission scale, to just go, I don't know, still exploring, kind of fluid.
TBD.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think I've never met anybody in the community that would really want to force you to make a decision about that. But, they might offer to help you explore.
Yeah. So it kind of sounds like I'm maybe seeing some really hard lines where there aren't really any hard lines. It's sort of just preferences.
Well, it's entirely possible that what you're experiencing is some of because it sounds like it's mostly online rather than in person. Am I right about that?
Like I said, I'm single right now, and I'm pretty sure that I'm poly as far as that goes. I know it's not really kink, but I have a hard time sort of taking on that label, because I feel like by taking on a label or an adjective that I'm kind of maybe putting myself in a box or cutting myself off to other experiences. Okay. If I say, I identify this way, then that sort of draws a line there, and then I'm in this box, and then other people are over here, and maybe they're having more fun over there.
Well, if it's more about being poly as opposed to being somewhere within one of the kink spectrums, there are lots of people who flow in and out of poly. It is entirely possible to be essentially poly by nature, but to make a choice to be in a monogamous relationship. I've absolutely seen people who are really monogamous by nature attempting to be poly, and sometimes rising to it, sometimes doing a tremendous amount of self-work and rising to it and eventually doing pretty well with it. So I think it's perfectly fine to say that you're not to own the poly as a label, but as a relationship style. There are people who feel like, no, it's a label for them, but it's very debatable as to whether or not it's something that you put on as an identifier as opposed to a relationship choice.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and of course, again, that just means that is how you're identifying at the moment, and that changes and can change at any point when you say that it does.
I guess I've heard it sort of explained both ways, probably by people who are using it both ways, either as polyamorous doesn't really describe me, it's just describing this relationship. And then I've heard it totally the other way, polyamory is not a choice for me, this is just how I'm built, this is who I am. And I don't know, I guess I'm sort of figuring out at this point where I fall on that spectrum as far as is this a choice? Am I just being hard-headed or stubborn about this is what I have to be happy, and maybe I am closing myself off to some potentially great experiences.
Poly self-doubt is basically par for the course. I mean, I think that's definitely going to be part of it, and there's that asking yourself, is this worth it? Is the social stigma, is the jealousy, is the everything that can go along with it worth it? And that can be a difficult question, and it's a question that's made all the more difficult by social shame and religious stigma and all of that. The question of, is polyamory, say, more like an orientation versus a kink or maybe a choice? That is not easy to answer. I mean, I actually went to a conference with two incredible speakers that are, major authors in the sex therapy world, and I basically posed that question to both of them and got two different answers about, is polyamory a orientation, say. And I tend to feel that it's a part of who you are. It's not necessarily a lifestyle choice. But it is about, you do have options about what to do with that if it is integral to who you are as a person. And not everybody even believes that that's the case. So it's difficult to sort out how you feel and what feels like a good fit for you. But even if we do see it as an orientation, we also recognize that people's orientations are fluid and changing. So maybe this is all academic. At the end of the day, it's about, again, finding how you're going to have your best life and find your best happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like probably a big part of the issue is just spending a lot of time in my own head about things of like, oh, this is the ideal or something like that. And I'm living in a really small town right now, and it's hard to sort of, I guess, like I said, verbalize to other people like where I'm at or what I'm looking for. I used to live on the West Coast, and it was super easy. I was part of like the ethical non-monogamy of Central Oregon, and you know, I had people there, and you know, I felt like we were speaking the same language. And it's, I guess, being outside of that is causing me to question myself, like, am I crazy?
Yeah, it's tricky to be isolated, no question.
And in Austin, you don't have to be. There's an enormous poly community here. Absolutely enormous. Come find us.
Yeah, it might be time to pick up and find somewhere new.
Well, Austin is a wonderful place to not just live, but, I mean, live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like everybody who's actually in Austin watching this right now is like, stop, unplug their microphones, turn it
Right.
off. Don't tell people to move here.
No more. No more.
We're done. But wherever
I-35
you are.
can't take any more.
Yeah.
Sorry. Inside Austin joke.
Yes, totally.
But yeah, wherever you are, the opportunities may be limited, and that is tricky and uncomfortable. But we would encourage you to find community, whether it's online, whether it's by calling in and watching shows like this one. We like to let people know that there are other folks like you out there, and we hope to be a little bit of a welcoming point for all sorts.
Part of that community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your call, Alex.
Thank you guys for taking it. I appreciate it. This is my first time calling in, so it's an excellent experience.
Well, we really appreciate it.
And look forward to when we get to hear from you again.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You too. Yeah. Gender identity and orientation identity are always, I think, not always, but oftentimes very fluid and very difficult for people because of those labels and how society uses those labels versus how we think we should use the labels. But
yeah, and I mean, even like a word like polyamory, which doesn't have nearly the baggage of, say, queer or fag or something that can be really, really triggering and hurtful to hear. Even a word like polyamory is often hurled as a slur, or just comes with a lot of shame and difficulty. So, yeah, it is very, very tricky to decide how to apply that label and whether to be out with that label. I mean, obviously we're here with our names in front of us, in front of recorded on the internet, but I know plenty of lovely poly folks that don't have that opportunity to be out and to be so open with those labels. Right. And so, I like to use my privilege to encourage people to be out and to be, to know that there are other people like them. But I fully recognize that not everybody is going to have that same comfort with those names. And even if they feel that comfort inside, may not feel comfortable or able to share that with other folks.